Hello everyone, welcome back to Gates to Aesgaard, and we are about to go platforming. Hooray! Platforming and lag. Ugh. Come on, what's your problem? Platforming. I don't really like platforming, but, you know, we'll live with it. As long as the lag doesn't kill us, life will be just peachy. I forgot all about the platforming part. So you can't even really tell, like, up to 3 platforms ahead what's going on, because you can barely see in this place. Ugh. But anyway, middle of the night now. I usually record in, like, the afternoon, so this is the first time I think I've ever actually recorded at night. Where do we go now? I saw something! Okay. No, it's freaking lag. I don't know why I'm noticing the lag more now. I mean, it's not any worse than it normally is. Die! I think you're just, yeah, you're just normal ammo. Come on. Why are you flying so high? Anyway, I guess, I don't know, whatever, we'll keep going. I probably need to, like, empty my space. I don't think I deleted a lot of stuff. That might be helpful, but I don't feel like it right now. Hopefully I won't run out of space. I don't think I will. What the? Is that? Oh, gosh. Well, Blade Key, this is what we're looking for. This is what we spent all this time hunting down. So, cutscene, which Trap's probably going to destroy like the last one. Oh well. That looks just creepy. Hello. Yeah, it's destroying the cutscene now. Oh well. It's more incentive for you to play it on your own, so you can actually see how creepy it was supposed to be. Anyway, we're randomly here now. I found the blade key, and it's truly shaped like a dagger. As I touched it, I had a terrible vision, saw a demon that was pulling the key. I blacked out. When I woke up, I was in a completely different place. Hooray! With a freaking wall behind us. Alright then. Do I even, like, need the torch here? Or can I see without it? I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, I can see pretty... it doesn't make any difference with or without it. So let's phrase it that way. I still can't see, but... Why is there, like, a chandelier in the archway? That doesn't make any sense to me. Oh well. Doing me. This place is creepy. Coffin. Nothing in the coffin. Investment. Interesting note. We'll do this first. Your blood skill is increased. The king's axeman. Sit, my son. I'm going to tell you a story. Take your quill and parchment and make your scratchings if you must. I am unable to make sense of it anyway, but your sons, if they even care, deserve to know what happened all those years ago. I have carried this load on my shoulders like a sack of grain for many years, and it's time to rid myself of the burden. I know you look at me and see a bitter old man with a filthy gray beard and a useless body, but I am ready to kneel before the Reaper when he calls, so he may take my head with his great scythe. I look around these walls and wonder why I was spared. Am I being punished? For what? For wielding the axe when my king demanded it? I might have preferred death to this pathetic existence in this lonely, single room with only rats and cockroaches for company. They run over me when I sleep. Did you know that? They search amongst my blankets were crumbs of bread that fall from my crippled hands before it even reaches my mouth. If they find none, they set about nibbling and biting, drawing blood, and I am too weak to brush them away. Have you ever eaten a cockroach? Don't speak. I will not hear again of your pious priests and their empty promises of forgiveness. What have the gods done for me? You, my son, are all that I have, and I can see the hate and yet pity in your eyes. I beg you to listen for your dead mother's sake. Do what you must with the parchment you read on, and then leave me. Death's icy breath touches my soul, and I shiver inside. I fear there's not much time left for me. I see that my giggling disturbs you, but I can't stop myself. And I think I am afraid after all. This is the tale of a king, a land awash with blood, and the might of an infernal god. Take heed, and be thankful you are not in my place. You already know that I was the king's executioner, his axeman, but not how and why. And if you think I have regrets about those days, well, you're wrong. It's what came after that is my burden. I remember clearly the feeling as my great axe would bite into the bared necks of my king's enemies, and the sound of the bloody head rolling away into the basket beneath the gore-soaked floor. I used to watch for my king's smile as the body lay twitching and bleeding, and then my own head would stay in its place on my shoulders for a little longer, and not be lying in a pool of my own blood, staring at the sky with dead eyes. Let me tell you how I came into the employ of Spokane, the man many called the Savage King. He is known far and wide for his cruelty, and there is much opposition to his rule, but no one dared challenge his right to the throne if they meant to keep their breath in their lungs and my axe from their necks. I couldn't tell you who my father was, and my mother never spoke of him. I wonder if she knew. We lived in a run-down hovel in a poor part of Commoner's Row, close to the fishermen's boats, and the stench of rotting fish soaked into everything, even the wooden planks of the huts. I had a sister and a younger brother, but I had no time for them. They were like ghosts to me. I used to roam the streets while my mother entertained the guards who were supposed to be watching for trouble in the town, and I would be beaten black and blue if I came home before dark. Sometimes, if it rained, I would hide underneath one of the upturned boats and wait, hungry and wet, hoping in vain there would be food on the table that night. One evening, I crept just inside the doorway, and I saw a small pouch on the floor, almost hidden by a pile of clothes. It was dark inside, but I could see a few coins spilling from the pouch. And as I reached for it, a hand grabbed me by the neck, and I was shaken viciously the way a dog shakes a rat. I was thrown across the room and hit my head on the edge of the table, and everything went black. I awoke in a cell in the castle dungeon. My head was pounding, and the sight was gone from my right eye. And that's why my eye looks like a milky glass marble, if you ever wondered. I could hear moans and screams coming from the walls themselves, and I held my hands over my ears to block the sound. I didn't notice the rattle of keys outside the door for his shrieking, and next thing I knew, I was being dragged from the cell by my hair. I was thrown across the floor where I stuck at the feet of King Stockhen himself. He looked down at me with a sneer of distaste, and he was about to kick me away when he changed his mind. He must have seen the kinship of blood in me that day, because he put me to work in the dungeon, and it was 10 years before I saw sunlight again. Not that I cared. By that time I had grown into a man with corded muscles and strength of a forest bear and the seeds of hatred in my heart. One day the keeper of keys came to me carrying a huge axe and a black hooded robe, and he told me the king had named me his executioner. I now had no other name but the king's axeman. Luck smiled on me that day, for another reason, because I was to swear an oath of silence, and I only would save my tongue from the dagger if I kept my vow. Then again, I don't think it was luck really, but more of a test. Anyway, the first swing of the blade was the hardest, but it excited me, and after that I relished every splash of blood that splurted over the killing floor. I remember the day the king came to the dungeons along with 3 men and a woman I had never seen before. There was to be a special execution. I had heard of these 4. They were the king's favorite generals. Fortin, Raisin, and Clawthorn were all mean, hard-looking men. But it was the woman I would have feared the most. There were rumors even here of her sadistic excesses. She carried a studded leather whip with glass splinters embedded in the lash. It was not meant for the victim to survive that punishment. Her name was Miriam, and she was wickedly beautiful. I couldn't help but stare when she wasn't looking, and once the king caught me. He smiled, but his eyes were like hot coals as he drew an imaginary blade across my throat. So, sorry about my terrible reading tonight. Anyway, the execution went ahead as planned, and as usual, I never knew whose neck it was that my axe bit into. But later, after the king had gone and there were grumblings among the guards. Terrible reading. Anyway, it seemed someone important had displeased the king, and now they expected trouble. It didn't matter to me. I had done my job well. My axe glistened and dripped with bright heart blood. I overheard many other rumors as the guards gossiped. Stories about the king and the Where the crap am I getting these words? Alright, starting over. I overheard many other rumors as the guards gossiped. Stories about the king and violent rages which made him strike out at anyone near him. How women were dragged from the lower city brothels to entertain him and cool his temper, if only for a short time. Many times women were taken from the royal chambers in the morning and buried in unmarked graves or were thrown to the jackals outside the city. I remember at the time a young woman was thrown to one of the dungeon cells, and she remained there still, scarred so badly that no man would ever look upon her again. The king took delight in her torture and visited from time to time to taunt and torment her. I wondered what she had done to be singled out for special treatment. Very few knew of the caverns below the dungeon, but I discovered them one evening when I heard voices, and following the sound led me to a tunnel blocked by an old wooden door. It was ajar, however, and by a dim light I saw King Stucken and the 4 generals gathered around a table where a bloody prisoner lay in a stupor. A mage in black robes was solemnly reciting from a book, but I had never heard such words before. I listened out of sight as they spoke of pain and suffering and the various methods that could make it last longer without killing their captives. I was enthralled. The mage was bragging that she could summon demonic beings from the abyss, but I found it difficult to believe. At least I hoped it wasn't true. Demons and gods were not meant for man to call. They were far beyond the doings of mankind. So the monks told us as children, but they spoke falsely as well. Many times after that I heard screams and inhuman sounds coming from those caverns. Commoners and prisoners were dragged there and forced to endure unspeakable torments, and I was fascinated by what I saw when King Stucken enlisted me to get rid of the bodies. It was on one such occasion, when I was waiting to be called, that I heard a commotion coming from the stairs leading to the upper palace. A soldier, covered in blood, rolled over the balcony, followed by another who was stumbling down the staircase, screaming about revolution and murder. King Stucken, followed by the generals, quickly emerged from the tunnels, demanding to know what was happening. It seemed there had been an uprising, and many of the palace guards had deserted their posts and joined the rebels who were now searching for the king and his supporters. The royal court was decimated, and all of the king's servants and his favorite concubine had been slaughtered. The soldier was too weak to say more, and Stucken opened his throat with a dagger, pushed the body away before he was flat to the floor, then turned away and walked swiftly back into the tunnels. The others followed, and I ran with them to the cavern. I pushed the heavy door shut and bolted it behind me. No one took much notice of me. The mage began reading aloud from the tome on the table, and the air began to shimmer as she recited passages in a strange guttural voice suddenly the room was shrouded in a darkness that felt like a living being. I'm reading too fast for myself. It was hard to tell how long it lasted, but I felt as though I was spinning, and I thought my eardrums would explode with the pressure. I heard voices and knew the king and the others were still alive. Gradually, the light returned, and I could see a stone room lit by dozens of candles, and I realized the mage had transported us to safety. There were no doors or windows in the strange room, yet the candles burned brightly. It was circular, like the inside of a child's play ball, but constructed of smooth white stone, and I suddenly found it hard to draw breath. My heart pounded in my chest, and I wanted to claw at the walls like a coward. I thought the maid incompetent and that she had teleported us into danger. I know she saw it in my eyes because she frowned for a moment, then laughed in my face and turned away, dismissing me like a bothersome insect. The king and his generals were gathered round a mirror that was as tall as Dakin himself, but its surface was a pulsating mercury gray reflecting nothing. The maid started muttering in her arcane language, and the glass shimmered and cleared, revealing a nightmarish scene from hell. I felt like ants were crawling under my skin as I caught a glimpse of the palace forecourt. Impossible! It could not be. Dozens of broken bodies had been thrown about like savage dolls, and blood was dried and black on their splitting, putrefied skin. Fat droning flies and other flesh-eating insects hovered and settled on the corpses and were easily disturbed by the tiniest bruise. The huge marble columns had been torn from their pedestals and smashed like matchsticks, and most of the ceiling was scattered in chunks amongst the wreckage. Even now I could not speak. My tongue was like dried leather in my mouth, and for the first time I felt fear. King Stockend roared like a raging bull and raised a massive fist as if to smash the mirror, demanding to know what was happening. Surely we had only been in this stifling room for a few hours at most, yet what we saw below appeared to have happened many days ago. Raisin struck the mage with a clenched fist, knocking her to the floor, and she screamed and pointed to the mirror in terror. The destroyed forecourt was being gradually enveloped by an unnatural darkness, as though eclipsed by the shadow of a titan, and I heard Miriam's excited intake of breath as she watched. Swarton and Clathorn kicked the mage roughly out of the way and crowded around the mirror, fascinated by the demonic sight before them. Towering above the palace itself was a monstrous sight, swaying with a rhythm only it could hear, and an appetite as endless as eternity. As their chimera, Chaos, the destroyer itself, it was known by many names, and it was one of the diabolic gods. The mage had not called this from the abyss. It was drawn by disturbances in time, the ripples caused by bloody death and anguish, and it demanded sacrifice. This is a really long book. The king and his generals are mesmerized, as though listening to a soothing childhood melody. All I remember was hundreds, maybe thousands of gnashing teeth stained by crimson shreds of flesh, and a serpentine body that swayed like a hooded serpent. I couldn't hear over the shrieking and howling of the beast, and I thought the room in which we stood would shatter into pebbles and fall below into the gigantic maw. The king's eyes were glazed and wild, much like fanatics and berserkers who inhaled the smoke of bitter weed in fruitless search for enlightenment. And he reached out and touched the mirror. His hands passed through the surface. His four loyal generals seemed to be stricken with the fervor of the gods as they fell to their knees and begged for the favor of Chaos incarnate. What followed became my constant living nightmare for the remaining years of my life. A swirling, raging wind drew the wreckage of the palace into a furious maelstrom, and a victorious scream split the air. The monstrosity below stretched its gaping mouth so wide I thought it would split apart. One by one, King Stucken, Miriam, Clathorn, Raisin, and Swarton stepped into the mirror and fell, tumbling over and over until they were consumed by the god waiting below. I cried out in English as they were swallowed whole. The mirror exploded into a million tiny pieces, and I think my mind was shattered along with it. I awoke in total darkness, thinking I had been completely blinded, but gradually the gloom lightened, and I saw that I had been returned to the caverns below the palace. My throat was raw. The first sounds I had made in nearly 20 years were my screams for the king, who saw the bloodlust in me and allowed it to flourish like a festering wound. Many called him cruel, but I called him father. The maid was sitting across the room, leaning on the wall. She was staring at me with amusement, and I wanted to crush her like a bug. But I was weak, and in the end it didn't really matter anymore. I dragged myself to my feet, and when I felt steady enough, I walked along the tunnel back to the prison. It was quiet, all the cell doors were open, and the prisoners were gone. The bodies of soldiers lay where they fell, gnawed almost to the bone by rats. I continued on to the staircase, and as I opened the door leading to the upper palace, I knew there was no one and nothing left. Carrion birds flew high in the sky, but the bones of the dead were not picked clean. The palace was completely destroyed, and it had started to rain. The cleansing had begun. There was nothing there for me, so I returned to the prison, and it has been my home ever since. You were born here, my son, and not a year after my king was perished, and your mother felt the last kiss of my beloved axe upon her neck. Now the air grows chill, and I see a shadow at the door. Is it the Reaper? I am ready. See, I kneel before you and offer you my life. What's happening? Is it a dream or another nightmare? It is not the Reaper at all, but a vision of my king. He is standing over the body of an abomination, a demon of the abyss, and it looks as though they had just done battle. He raises his clenched fist above his head and screams his victory to the cursed gods. I'm running out of time. I'm going to have to finish this book on the next episode. Next time, everyone. Thanks for watching. This book is really long.